Hey guys, Dan Nichols. So I got with me here today Noah, and Noah is a Michigan guy. Where are you at in Michigan, Noah?
I'm downriver a bit, like a half hour to Detroit.
All right, cool. So downriver guys means he's usually that means south of Detroit, right? So for
That's
those
right.
that don't live in the Mitten State, so cool. How long have you known George?
Probably since the beginning of college. I actually ran into him through like a mutual friend that I met there, and this guy's like, "Yeah, I've been doing Russian martial arts for a couple of years." And I'm like, "That sounds cool. Like, sign me up for that." You
Yeah,
know,
it does sound cool.
it sounds cool.
Yeah, and then so had you done previous martial arts prior to that at all, or
No, not at all. I'm actually pretty unathletic, so this was like my first introduction to martial arts.
okay?
A bit after that, like I started exploring just different art forms and Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a little bit, and I was just like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like as effective, like I'm on the ground too much. I don't like rolling around.
Well, especially when you got yeah, I mean you got weight advantages too and things like that that make a big
Yes.
difference. Yeah. So, how long have you been training with George? Because you're a student of his now, I think, right?
Yeah, so I've seen him on and off. I think I've been seeing him for like 5 years now,
Okay.
ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're one of the guys that works out in the garage with George.
Yeah, you won't find me on any of his videos, but yeah, that's the same garage that I would hang out in, and this he's really cool to just shoot the shit with, and really casual. Um, I would say that it's a very personalized lesson. Like he can definitely see like the skill level that you're at, and acclimate to whatever level you're at.
Cool. You've been hit by him a couple times. Yes. No.
Yeah, many times.
I saw your eyes got really wide. Now
Yeah.
you haven't necessarily had the pleasure though, and I say that sort of jokingly, of being hit by a lot of other people, have you?
Right. I'm not really in the, physical security industry. So luckily I don't have to use these skills for like my career or whatever. But no, it's really interesting just how differently like people punch after meeting George, because it feels like they give up as soon as they meet your body. With him, it's just like a mechanical force. Like he just keeps on trucking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I like that. That's a nice way of saying it. Uh, it's actually interesting because you haven't been in it as long as I've interviewed about six or seven other guys, some of them grandmasters and have been doing this for 30, 40 years.
Right.
And they didn't describe it necessarily like that. I like how you said that. And I guess really what I like about that is there's a greenness because you haven't had your head polluted, if you will. And I don't mean that in a bad way. You haven't had your head, I don't know, skewed by other arts, right?
Right. Like I haven't been in like karate for 20 years, and then I'm trying to like come and unlearn everything that I've learned in order to perform differently, because part of like developing striking power is like, in a couple months you're going to be punching way differently than what you are currently. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I could feel that development in myself of like not even knowing how to throw a punch, and then like I mean, I really haven't had to defend myself, but it's more of a party trick where people are like, "Can you teach me how to do that, 1 inch punch thing where you just like throw people back 2 feet?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
It is a fun party
It's
trick.
just kind of cool.
Yeah, George was doing that party trick in high school long before any of the more regimented arts. That I mean, he was doing some arts, but yeah, I remember that it was like a party trick, no doubt about it.
Yep.
Um, but and just for clarity, because that comes up, right? So to me, and I'm a seasoned martial artist at some level. I'm not trying to claim like I'm some amazing martial artist, but I do know that the 1 inch punch, as you just said, is different than what George does. And what I mean is like in other words, George was doing the 1 inch punch when we were in, like I said, we were in high school. He was doing that, right? But where he's at now with the ability to strike from any angle and do all these things, and whether he's an inch away from you or whether he's 6 feet from you, to actually have him come at you, and the other one being that thing where he'll just take a finger, and people see it on video and they're like, that's a bunch of crap, and he'll move you all over the room with a finger.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of focus, and it's like it's a lot of practice to get up to that point. I can see like maybe how you would like develop that like skill and stuff, but still like being able to like move someone around with your fingers, that's really something. Like you don't see that like every day, and when you do, it's just like, man, like what am I like looking at?
Yeah,
And then it happens to you, and you still don't believe it. It's just like it feels like somebody's strong arming you, and it's all on one finger. It's
Yeah.
just like concentrated energy.
Have you ever had people that you've been hanging out with, let's say, watch a video of George moving somebody around in the garage and been like, "Oh, that's a bunch of crap."
Yeah, they're like it's all scripted. He knows what's going to happen. I'm like, yeah, he's been through it before. It's all scripted. Like he knows exactly what's going to happen. And I don't mean that like it's all made up. It's just like he kind of has this like sixth sense of like what you're gonna do. There'll be some times that I'm over there and it's like I feel like I can't move or do anything because like he's just gonna come out of nowhere. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I meant, let me rephrase that. So, have you ever
Yeah,
had,
sure.
yeah, like you ever had somebody watching it and saying, "Oh, that's a bunch of crap," and you're like, "Oh, yeah, it looks like a bunch of crap," until you feel it.
Yeah, it's very hard to convince somebody that like what they're seeing on video is actually like real. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you taste test it for yourself, you're like, "Aha, I
Yes,
got it."
you still don't believe like what you're seeing is happening in front of you. You're still like kind of like scratching your head at it, and it's like, man, how is this even like possible? But
Yeah.
it's just a lot of hard work over the years, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a lot of effort and understanding, and I think for me, the aha moment, when I learned from George was always he can shortcut. He can shortcut. I mean, I would bet that you've been at this 5 years that you can strike pretty damn hard for a guy that's 5 years in, because you understand some of these principles or at least scratch the surface of them. And like I
I'd
said, you
say
weren't.
so.
Yeah, and you didn't have some sort of preconceived notion about how to strike. Like you listen to a lot of. I'd be careful with this. Like old timers will be like, "Oh yeah, all the power is generated in your hips," and I'm like, "Oh yeah." Tell you what, sit down in a chair,
Yeah.
or have George sit down in a chair and then have him hit you using no hips, no legs, no nothing, just basically even from his elbow forward.
Yeah, no, that's actually like an exercise that like he like told me to do is like, can you just like sit there and like see how much power that you generate? So like I would sit there in front of the bag, like actually like sitting down and not even like swivel my hips at all, but it's all just generated from like individual points. And you line up these individual points. I guess like if you're being like really conscious of your arm and you can feel like every single motion of that punch. Um, you just take it slow at first, and then once you can do it slow, you just start speeding it up.
Yeah,
And
like you got to slow down to speed up,
exactly,
right?
because if you're feeling like all of that, and then you're able to do that while it's fast, like you're just much more conscious than like other people in the fight. Like it's literally feels like you're kind of moving around them, bending time almost because they just don't see everything that's happening. And it's difficult to describe that, like the sensation until like you're like one on one with a person that's really good at that, namely George.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, and I love that. You're like my first interview I've done where you sort of kind of like shared little bits and pieces of that, and I like that. Kind of like almost you've analyzed it, you've thought about it. It's a cerebral thing to you, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot of internal work, I would say, more than external. Like I'm not a very strong guy, but I would claim to be somewhat powerful just because you just focus and you get good at doing one thing really well. And I mean, this can apply to multiple areas in your life, not just martial arts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing that you pointed out was the different points, right? So like generating, how you generate that movement, and this is actually we're doing these videos because ultimately we're going to have George, share and teach some of this stuff online, and I'm creating a bunch of testimony around it for people that have been exposed to George, had the experience of being hit by him, trained with him, all those other good things. And I love how you pointed out, like, really just one point. I mean, I've seen George flick his wrist and create excruciating
Because
power,
all that control, like
pain.
he's all right here. He's like not paying attention to anything else except what he has to, and it's all right there.
But using the physics, if you will, and the
Yeah,
psychology piece can take a 160-pound guy and have you hitting pretty damn hard.
exactly. People don't expect it out of me, which is another psychological factor. Because I really feel that the power is all generated internally, and it's kind of a mind over matter thing, which I don't know. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I appreciate it. I really appreciate your taking the time to do this. Um, do you think if somebody gets George's tutelage, if you will, that they could, in a reasonable amount of time, I don't know. Well, I've actually seen people take their striking power, if you will, from a 1 to a their 10 in a matter of an hour working with George, with certain types of strikes. I'm not beginning to profess that somebody's going to perfect what George has done in an hour. I'm not trying to say that. But what I am saying is, do you think somebody taking or classes or learning or taking a course from George could benefit greatly from it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really a mindset thing. So I guess it really depends on like where you're coming from. If you're able to like listen and like vibe with him well, because he can say something at you, but you have to understand it for yourself and you have to do like the self work. But I think like an hour or two of like with him, which is usually a lecture, I take that information, I practice it, and yeah, I definitely, feel more powerful like after actually applying the information that he's giving me.